Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss colors and Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish. Jyotish is Sanskrit for Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology, if you're not familiar, is ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So let's take a look here. Just a quick announcement or two. I have coming up in January 2026, so around the corner, Level 1 Vedic astrology course that I'm offering. I do have a little video posted on it if you'd like to learn more, and the applications for this course will be available on Monday, 29th of September. So after the eclipse cycle we have coming up in September. So if you're interested in that, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for an application or to be put on a mailing list for future offerings. Okay. Also, this talk is a teaching video essentially, and so all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are on my concept playlist. They can be found there. So if you're looking for other teaching videos, you can find them there. Okay, so colors in Vedic astrology. Okay. Well, I have listed at the top planets and colors and that sort of thing. There's a planetary or their color associations. But why do we even care about this? I guess we should answer that question maybe first. Well, one is that different colors, because they're associated with different planets, you can essentially work with the colors to work with the planets. Okay. So this gets into the realm of what we call upayas or planetary remedies. Okay. And so, for example, maybe you know in your chart that you have a challenged sun. Okay. Maybe sun is debilitated, maybe it's eclipsed, that sort of thing. And it's basically it seems like the sun is giving you quite a bit of problems, or maybe you have problems with your father because that's one of the or problems with authority because those are things that the sun symbolizes, or maybe that you have problems with your health. Okay, so what you can potentially do is use these colors in various ways to essentially improve your relationship with these planets. Okay. Now, it depends, again, sometimes a little will go a long way, and sometimes, you could dye everything, a certain color and things won't change very much. And this gets down to your chart in terms of like how much what we would call drid karma or fixed karma that is. Sometimes when we look at birth charts, we'll see that like every different angle we look at to a certain area of somebody's life, it's like challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge. And then it's like, how much can this do? It's hard to say. But sometimes we see in a chart that it's like sometimes there's challenge, but then there are other, angles we're taking and analyzing the planet or the area of life. And sometimes it looks like, oh, there's definitely potential here, positive potential, but there's also challenges. So when we have this kind of mixed, situation or mixed karma, and we would call it udrid karma or unfixed karma, then there's potentially more room to work with upayas or planetary remedies such as colors to bring about a positive result. Okay. So again, so take this all with a grain of salt. Okay. And things don't necessarily have to be in bad shape either. So, maybe you're not looking to do like a big planetary remedy for anything in your chart, but maybe you just want to generally honor the planets, almost like get ahead of it, almost like build good karma before problems arise, that sort of thing. So, maybe in general, like on Mondays, you wear white because white is associated with with the moon. Okay, and Monday is Moon Day. Okay, and then on Thursday you wear yellow because yellow is associated with Jupiter. Thursday is Jupiter Day. Okay. So, and I do have another video on days of the week and the planets in Vedic astrology. Okay. So again, you can kind of get in the trenches and try to forklift, a really challenged planet or area of your life. And again, it's probably if it's that deep and heavy, probably wearing a color isn't going to be enough, frankly. But in the way, in as much as you have wiggle room, as much as you have self-determination, because we do, even when we have fixed karma, drid karma, or unfixed karma, adrid karma, like there's always a power of choice and willpower. Okay. And Yeah, so, it is what it is. So, with that all being said, let's look at the planets and their primary associations of color. But some of these have like a few sort of other options potentially. Okay. Well, let's just go through and we'll go through this like, in days of the week fashion. So, starting with the sun's primary color association is dark, deep red. Okay. There are others for the sun. So orange, for example, is thought to some people consider to be a color um, associated with the sun. Also gold and copper. So again, that like the sun, sun type colors. Literally the sun and sky. Then there's the moon. Probably not too surprising. Like bright milky white. Is the color associated with the moon. As an alternative, silver. Okay, and again, colors here. There are also like metals and gemstones and that sort of thing. I don't tend to get into that because several of my teachers advised all of us not to because with things like gemstones and metals, sometimes you can get positive effects, but you can also exacerbate, the negative effects. So it's like I'd rather not even go there. Um, but some people do that, and some people do it well. So if you decide you want to go down that road, make sure you choose, a person who's well versed and knowledgeable in that area of how to do it properly. Like even the setting of the stones and the metals and stuff like that is supposed to be done on certain days with certain mantras and all this thing that I don't even know about, but I know generally about it. So yeah. Anyway, so then Mars, we have bright red. And as an alternative, I've seen sometimes coral, like kind of a pinkish, orangey, lighter red, then for Mercury, Mercury's pretty solidly green. And then for Jupiter, Jupiter's pretty solidly yellow. Then Venus, we have another planet associated with white. And because you can, those two can get mixed up, it's like if you wear white, like which planet are you trying to ameliorate? Maybe both, maybe. And maybe if you were white, like that's you could kind of, I guess, feed two birds with one seed, I guess. But other colors I've seen associated with Venus are light blue and also variegated, like a pattern. Not just like a solid color, but a variegated pattern. Okay. Then for Saturn, dark blue is fairly solidly Saturn and black. Although I've seen K2, the south node of the moon, also associated with black. So, black, dark blue for Saturn. As alternatives, purple, violet, indigo for Saturn. Okay. Um, then for Rahu, the north node of the moon, gray. And as alternatives, and again, these are kind of get into like patterns and plaid, checkered fabric or design. And then the color ultraviolet, which you can't see. But that's also, Rahu, and we'll see K2 is infrared. Rahu and K2 are, they're calculations. They're not planets with actual mass. So you can't actually see them in the sky. And they're also considered shadow planets. So then you see like the shadows, colors associated with the shadow planets. Okay. Or Chaya Graha. Yeah. Chaya means shadow. Then for K2, black. And then also similar to Rahu, like plaid, checkered, but all infrared color. Okay. So again, you can check out my Days of the Week Vaar video if you want to learn more about the days of the week in astrology, Vedic astrology. Also, what's also important is like again, if you're trying to figure out, which of these planets or colors to work with, one, birth chart reading is really important. But two, it's like understanding what each of these planets symbolize because you have to kind of see, like, let's say you do have problems with father or whatever. Okay, so what would you be looking at? Well, one, you'd be looking at the sun because the sun represents the father of the planet. It's the what we call a karaka, symbol of father. But then you'd also be looking at usually the ninth house because the ninth house is related to father and authority. Then you'd be looking at the planets in that house or aspecting that house because they're influencing the house, and you'd be looking at the lord of the house. Okay, so you have all these different things. So and you also have other things like Pidragrahas, which are planets of vulnerability. Okay, so maybe everything looks great in the main chart, but then your, ruling planet for the ninth house is a quadruple Chidragraha. and it's like, where did this come from? And so you have to like dig pretty deep. So, the real trick here, so to speak, it's not even a trick, the real, way to ameliorate this is to really figure out where the problem's coming from, like getting under the hood of the car and figuring out where the real problem is, getting at the root cause, in terms of the planets and stuff like that. But again, you don't have to do this deep dive, forklifting, dig things out of the trenches type of energy. You can try to get ahead of it and just like develop a relationship with these planets before anything major, sets off. Um, so again, this really gets to the idea of upayas or planetary remedies. And again, you can wear these colors, generally speaking, whenever. Again, if we keep talking about the sun here because it's the first on the list, but maybe just wear more dark red, you know, more often than you do, or specifically, you could wear dark red on Sundays because Sunday is the day of the sun. Also, another way to work with these colors is that another type of upaya that's often used in Vedic astrology is to provide donations. Okay. So, this could be donations of clothing, for example. So, especially, or cloth, or like foods, like dark red beans or dark red lentils or dark red cloth or clothing, like maybe specifically to appease. I mean, these are sort of old, really traditional classical ways of talking about it, is like to appease or ameliorate the energy of the planets. You can offer donations in this dark red color to appease the sun. Okay. Also, and this starts to, blend into like Vastu Shastra, which is basically like I guess more people know about feng shui in the United States. So it's sort of like Indian feng shui. You can think about it that way. Although I'm sure they fight about like who developed it first, like they do a lot of. But anyway, so maybe the color of your room or the color of your couch or color of your painting and stuff like that. That will bring, like, if you have a dark red painting, that's going to bring more sun energy into your home, into your space, office, or whatever. So that might be consideration. Also, festivals, you might see people wearing certain colors on festivals, or advised to wear certain colors on certain days. Like, I know, like, Navratri is right around the corner. That's happening next month in the middle of these eclipses, or at the end of the eclipse, the second eclipse. And the first goddess, so that's, if you're not familiar, Navratri is the 9 nights. It's a festival of 9 nights, and every night a different avatar of the goddess is, honored. Okay. And so on the first night is Shelputri, which she has a planetary association of the moon. So some people wear moon white on the first day of Navratri to honor Shilaputri and her association with the moon. So you can see there are like different layers of this, okay? So it can work in that way as well. So days of the week, festivals, generally, you can work with these colors in different ways. The other way that people work with these colors is what we call Nimrita. Nimrita is omenology. So if somebody crosses your path, or an animal crosses your path, or a car crosses your path, or whatever, and maybe you have a question in mind, this kind of gets into Prashna too, which is like answering questions, sort of like another divination tool with astrology and stuff. You can ask a question, and then like the first obvious sign you get, like maybe it's a black crow that crosses your path. So a black crow, black is associated with Saturn, and crows specifically are also associated with Saturn. So if a black crow crosses your path, then I would be looking to Saturn as some part of the answer to your question. Or like, let's say, oh, should I call my dad today or something like that? And then all of a sudden, this dark red car like crosses your path. It's like, oh, there's the sun crossing my path. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I should. So, yeah, so that's different ways that colors can be used in Vedic astrology. I do have a bit more information, because the thing is that even though I've been talking about colors in Vedic astrology, another big part of Indian, traditional culture and knowledge and stuff like that is Ayurveda, which is traditional Indian medicine, which has a slightly different take on colors. Okay. So I'll get into that just a little bit so that you can, again, integrate these potentially if you want. So yeah, so again, Ayurveda is traditional Indian medicine. It's more than 5,000 years old. It's also it's an energetic paradigm of medicine. So everything is about energies. Um, and so people, diseases, symptoms, thoughts, feelings, seasons, and colors all have different energies. And colors are thought to be like sort of like again, different wave, fractions of light. Okay, and healing is almost like a heliotherapy, or what chromotherapy, healing by colors. So in Ayurveda as well, so that whole branch of traditional Indian medicine uses color as well, but they use it in a slightly different way. And sometimes they can overlap. So I just thought I'd mention a little bit here. I do have a whole video on Ayurveda color theory on my other YouTube channel, Nature Source Care, where I get into the whole Ayurvedic, traditional Indian medicine view of color, therapy. But just to again mention it here so you're aware that it's out there, and sometimes it overlaps completely, and sometimes they seem like they're telling you two different things. Um, so in Ayurveda, there are essentially three different what we call doshas or imbalances. One is vata, loosely translated as wind. The second is pitta, loosely translated as fire, and then kapha, which is loosely translated as earth. So you can use different colors to balance, again, too much wind energy, too much fire energy, or too much earth energy. Okay, and to get into all that, I would check out that Ayurveda color theory video on my other channel. But this is where I think the overlap can be on the next slide. I think, yes, here. So, like I talked about, just with Vedic astrology, like the sun is a dark red color. Okay. So, if you're trying to integrate Ayurveda with Vedic astrology, um, we have this sort of glyph or graphic here where we have going from left to right, lighter to darker shades of color. Okay, and at the top we have red, and in the middle we have green, and at the bottom we have blue. Okay, so kind of the middle tone, kind of most primary version of these colors is in the middle here, red, kind of a bright red, then bright green, then bright blue. Okay. And so red is considered a warm color. Green is kind of considered a warmish color, not as warm as red, but warmish. And then there's blue, which is a cool color. So in Ayurveda, these temperatures matter in terms of what you're balancing. Okay. For kapha, which is an earth energy, which is cold and wet, usually you want warmer colors to balance the cold heaviness of kapha. With vata, since it's a windy energy and not very grounded, and it's cold and dry, you want typically warmer colors like red or green. The only thing though is because it's such a sensitive, like the wind is like constantly moving or whatever. And people who have a lot of vata can tend towards like anxiety and fear and overwhelm and stuff like that. You don't really want these super bright colors because they can be overstimulating to a vata person who's already overstimulated usually. You want something a little more grounding, so maybe like a little bit darker, like a little bit more of a grounded color, or maybe a little bit lighter to take the edge off here. But if you go too light or too dark, then you can actually, again, negatively influence vata. So again, I get into this, more in my Ayurvedic color theory video, but I just wanted to introduce this because most people aren't going to walk around with primary colors all the time. There are all these variations. So it's like, what do I do with pink? And what do I do with, or like mint green versus dark green or olive green and that sort of thing. So again, just more considerations here. Again, with the doshas and Ayurveda, lighter versus darker and warmer versus cooler makes a difference. Okay, so maybe you're trying to the reason why I'm talking about this too is again, like maybe, with your birth chart, you're trying to ameliorate Jupiter. So you're thinking about yellow color. Um, but then it's like, what would I be? I'm a pitta person. You know what I mean? Like pitta is a warm and yellow is a warm color. So the thing is, if you wear like bright neon yellow for a pitta person, pitta is already intense. And so if you choose a neon yellow color, that's going to increase pitta. So it might help your Jupiter, but it won't help your pitta. It can make the pitta worse potentially. And so, like, if you were trying to ameliorate Jupiter, but you are a pitta person, like maybe you'd want to do like a what is it, like a light yellow, like a limoncello type of color. You know what I mean? Like the really light, or sometimes they call it buttercream yellow, because that white is going to be cooling for the heat of pitta. Or you could maybe go the other way, where you get into these um, golden tones that are a little more grounded and stuff like that. It's kind of a muted version of yellow, but instead of muting it with white, you're kind of muting it with like maybe a little bit of brown. Like in fall, typically they'll wear like mustard yellow. Mustard yellow can be kind of hot and bright, but if you're talking about like just a really kind of mellow, slightly deeper version of yellow, that might work to help luring Jupiter, 'cause it's still yellow, but it would also ground the pitta more instead of like rev pitta up, which usually pittas are already like, they're overactive typically. Okay, so, some more considerations generally. I don't know if I have anything else. Let me check. So here's another, again, concept with color theory, since we're talking about colors here. I do mention this a bit. Again, I think I get into it more in my other talk, my other channel. But the other thing about colors, and this gets into lighter versus darker, gets into the notion of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Okay, so sattvic is more of like an ethereal, spiritually motivated energy, which tends to be lighter colors like pastels. Okay, because that white, when you mix the white in with these primary colors, you get pastels. And these kind of lighter, ethereal colors are considered to be more sattvic or kind of spiritual in nature. Then we have rajasic, which is more of a practical, goal-oriented energy. And so these tend to be like brighter colors, like, things that are stimulating, that are going to like get you going into action and that sort of thing. So the brighter colors with more chroma are considered to be more rajasic. They're going to be, energize you to go get the things crossed off your task list. And then we have tamasic, which is more of an inertia or detached energy. And these tend to be like darker colors where, if they get so dark, like if you get a dark blue or dark brown or black, even dark gray, like, it's almost like the color starts to disappear and become very like withdrawn. And that's a very tamasic energy. So, so this, pastels, chroma, darker colors, brighter colors, that sort of thing is again another consideration when choosing colors, you know. So it's not just, I think adding this, which probably makes it more complicated, but also more complete, is that it's not just about primary colors like bright red, bright green, bright blue, but these nuances of, do you want a lighter blue or darker blue, or lighter, pink versus a dark red. Some of it gets into the planets, but then it gets into Ayurveda, the doshas, the imbalances, vata, pitta, kapha, but also sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic as well. So that's where the integration point comes into, into things. And then again, depending on what you're trying to achieve, you can make your choices. And again, a lot of times this is very personal. So, you know, um, yeah. So I do have another video titled "Spiritual Nutrition" on my other YouTube channel, Nature Source Care, where I talk about the concept of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, because you can also use this concept of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic for foods and nutrition. So especially if you're trying to redirect, yourself, your mind, your spirit in a more spiritual direction, choosing more sattvic foods will help that. Okay. If you're trying to be more practical, you know, grounded and goal oriented and get things done, like more rajasic foods potentially. Yeah. And then if you're trying, and tamasic, it sounds, usually when they give the description of tamasic, everybody's like, oh, let's avoid that. And again, maybe some people should do less of the tamasic, but we need all three of them. Like if you don't have enough tamasic energy, you won't be able to sleep. Your mind won't be able to shut down. So, yeah. So again, it's all about balance. But again, there are these various perspectives. Like, what does Vedic astrology offer color theory, and what does Ayurveda offer color theory? And then Vastu also uses it. I think it's like a combination again, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So there you go. Colors in Vedic astrology, Jyotish. Again, if you're interested in personal readings, I do offer those. Or if you want info or applications for upcoming class, or to be on a mailing list for future classes, you can email heartlightastroi.com. And then I do have that other YouTube channel, Nature Source Care, that's on, various forms of natural medicine. So like Ayurveda, yoga, homeopathy, naturopathic medicine, that sort of thing. All right. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right. So take good care. Namaste.